Hello, and welcome to Religion and Life. I'm your host, Ozzie Ostwalt. During the latter half of the 20th century, America experienced an awakening to conscience, an awakening that was and is still being expressed through the struggle to achieve equality and peace in this world. One of the foremost leaders in this awakening is with us today, the Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson. Known as the conscience of our nation and the great unifier, for more than half a century, the Reverend Jackson has been tireless in his advocacy for civil rights, gender equality, peace, economic and social justice, and inclusivity. It is my great honor to welcome the Reverend Jackson to our university and to our studio. Welcome, Reverend Jackson.
Thank you, sir.
I know you've had a busy day, and I thank you for taking time out today to be with us.
I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina.
I know you did.
So Asheville was 60 miles up the road. But now I'm in the real hills of Boone.
You were in the real mountains.
These are real mountains.
Yeah, Asheville was a little mountain.
Ash is the hill, this is the mountain.
That's right. Now, you also went to North Carolina A&T, so you have some real roots in North Carolina.
North Carolina is home.
Oh, good for you. We're happy to have you back here then today and hope you enjoy your stay. It's a real honor for us to have you at our university. I hardly know where to begin. You have been one of the leading voices for freedom and equality in the latter part of the 20th century and into the 21st century. You have worked with civil rights since the 1960s. You ran for president twice in the 80s, campaigns that really transformed the political landscape in America. Yet, by your own admission, all of this comes from a moral center, a place of faith.
You know, your theme, religion and life,
yes.
We're all God's children. It's an assumption. If my people will call by my name, will humble themselves and pray.
Right.
And how we treat others is how we express our love for God. And so certainly in 246 years of slavery, we did not treat others as we wanted to be treated. Slavery was ungodly.
Right.
Segregation by race. When I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, we couldn't use the same hospitals to be born in. We couldn't be buried in the same graveyard. The doctor can't give a speech in Washington, and I have a dream speech from Texas across to Florida up to Maryland. We couldn't use a single public toilet. We couldn't buy ice cream at Howard Johnson. We couldn't rent a room at Holiday Inn. The way we treat each other was ungodly. And the extent to which these barriers come down and bridges are built, we become more godly, more moral, and we begin to see the fruits of God's goodness. We didn't know how good baseball could be until everybody could play.
That's right. That's right.
We didn't know how good Appalachian State could be until everybody could play.
That's right.
You couldn't be Michigan with an all-white team.
You know about that. That's the greatest upset in football history.
The whole world knows about it. But you know, it just shows that when we're able to come together across lines that divide, and the playing field is even, and the rules are public, and the goals are clear, and the referees are fair, and the score is transparent, it's unlimited what we can do.
So you really equate the struggle for human rights and civil rights with a perspective of faith, with this idea that we're all God's children and all should strive for equality.
It kind of starts right there. You know, Jesus said that the Sadducees have a lot of laws, and the Pharisees have a lot of laws. If you just reduce them to two, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and might, and your neighbor as yourself. The first is not hard, it's loving God. God is the source of the sun, moon, stars. That's loving neighbor as self. That's where the politics of life comes. Loving neighbors as self. And yet that's the moral challenge of our time. So it obligates us. Jesus said, well, the way you do it is feed the hungry like you would like to be fed, clothe the naked, set the captive free. Jesus gives very practical examples of how to love one's neighbor, how to treat one's neighbor.
Jesus also challenged us on who we consider neighbor. Is that correct?
And I thought that was one of the most profound statements about how we deal with the issue of race. And without calling it racism, he said that a man was walking down the street tending to his business, and two thieves robbed him. And while dying, as in my imagination, he saw the rabbi, the reverend, coming down the street, and with the other side kept walking. He's looking, saw Levi, his brother, ethnic brother. Mm-hmm. He walked across the street. The Samaritan was from another religion, another culture, worship God different. He helped him pick them and said, who's your neighbor? It's the guy who you worship with, the guy you hang out with, the guy who helped you when you were down. And sometimes that defines brother and sisterly love, how you treat people.
It's a profound story.
It's a profound story.
Now, you're a Baptist minister.
Indeed.
Many of the civil rights leaders of your era were religious ministers. Al Sharpton is a Baptist minister. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister. Is there something about the African American church experience that brings civil rights and human rights to the forefront?
Well, during the slavery time, the abolitionists were ministers. They thought slavery was ungodly. It was immoral. And those who fought against the genocide in Germany in World War II, Bonhoeffer, and many theologians were religious leaders. So you cannot recognize religion at its best in genocide. You cannot choose culture over Christ and be a good Christian.
Right.
You must choose the cross above the flag. The flag is limited by a state, and the cross is universal. You must love people. If they're starving in India, if they've been killed in Germany, if they've been oppressed in South Africa, religion obligates to go. When I first ran for president, I said, well, you run for president, you're a minister. My politics don't make me religious. My religion makes me political.
Right.
It obligates me to fight for somebody other than myself. And that's to be engaged in the politics of our time. And what makes America great is the right to fight politically. That's one of our freedoms.
So the right to fight politically, the right to vote, these are all freedoms that come with obligations. Would you call what you just said, your religion makes you political, is that a type of moral imperative that comes out of your faith?
Well, when I grew up, there were blacks can serve on juries because we didn't have the right to vote. Only those who vote can serve on juries.
Right.
For example. And my father came from World War II. He served in the war. He fought for freedom in Europe. He came back, didn't have the right to vote. And the vote determines your right, your voice, your right to self-determination. And one of the things I'm concerned about there in North Carolina, God has blessed this state so abundantly. Great growth the last 50 years. You couldn't have the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons behind the cotton curtain.
Right.
You couldn't have the number one tire industry in South Carolina behind the cotton curtain. You couldn't have Toyota, Honda, and Nissan in the South behind the cotton curtain. The walls have come down and bridges are being built. And yet, in spite of that, the state that's so blessed and so religious will fight against Medicaid. The poorest people do not have medical care. They say, well, for good economy, everybody's working. Well, if you're working and can't afford health care, you're working your way into poverty. Working, you can't send your child to school, you're working your way into poverty. So you should be able to work and make a living and a life at the same time. Too few have too much, and too few have virtually nothing. So a sense of economic justice democratizing the economy is important.
And you've worked, some of the themes throughout your many decades of work for civil rights have been advocating for economic justice, for income equality, for right to universal medical care. Are these still, in your mind, kind of moral issues?
That's why Lyndon Johnson was one of the three great presidents of all time, because of his war on poverty. And he was smart enough to open the war on poverty in Appalachia. He opened up the University of Ohio at Athens. Johnson whitened the face of poverty, democratized economic debate. You couldn't dismiss it as socialist. You couldn't dismiss it as for the blacks.
Right.
He opened up. In contrast, when President Obama fought to get more health care for Americans, they called it Obamacare, which is designed to turn people against it. I met people who were really wanted to afford the care, they didn't want Obamacare. They didn't want the eggs. They were able to color it and turn people against it, even though they needed it. And so when Johnson said the coal miners working beneath the ground in the mountains and the workers working beneath the sun in the Delta have a common ground, they all need to have education for their children and food for their families and education for their minds. That's the America of our dreams. And I think Johnson was profound. He was right in that way.
And this is a way of putting a kind of different face on civil rights rather than basing civil rights on race. It's really looking at civil rights through an economic lens or through a class lens.
Well, it has to be both, because slavery was seen through the lens of race.
Right.
Segregation through the lens of race. So you have to offset that with some affirmative racial inclusion and gender equation. We came out of slavery, women didn't have the right to vote. Took an amendment to the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Women didn't get the right to vote. And then in 1965, blacks got to protect their right to vote and lost in 2013. So you have gerrymandering. As I laud the growth of the state, now this state stands out as a state leading the drive for voter suppression. I went to North Carolina A&T.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 10,000 students. That was the time we were in one congressional district. The A&T is now in 3 congressional districts. They cut it up where part of the students are in one district and the other 2 in 2 districts where they cannot win. That's classic voter suppression. There are 200 fewer voter precincts in North Carolina this time around, voter suppression. In North Dakota, most of the Native Americans live on reservations. You can only vote if you give your house address. They don't have a house address, they have a post office box. Undercutting them.
So it's another example of voter suppression.
Yeah, in Georgia, the state she's running against the Secretary of State, who is, he counts the ballots and sets the rules. She's running against the referee and the scorekeeper. It's not fair.
Right.
You know, when the Mountaineers beat Michigan, University of Michigan, I use these ball analogies because we learn so much, because that's the one place where we come together in big numbers on Saturday.
Right.
It's uniform color, not skin color, direction, not complexion. What about that game that makes us excited when we win and not but too depressed when we lose? Because it's fair.
Right.
Everybody looks at the playing field even, rules public, goals clear, referees fair, score transparent. You want to win, but even if you lose, you accept the outcome. That sense of justice must apply to access to education and wages and health care and housing.
So fairness, equity, transparency, all of these things will produce a more just
Those
society.
values are godly.
Godly values.
They're just values.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a question that
It's like race is godly. Racism is ungodly.
racism is ungodly, yes.
Race, you know, in God's diversity, Asians may look a certain way, and those on the equator or in the hot sun may look a certain way. And the races, but the idea of one is superior to the other is racism.
Right.
That's ungodly.
Sure. Is race itself a human construct, a sociological idea? Or?
Well, it is that we have different languages but the same message.
Mm-hmm.
If a doctor was to take us into the operating room today, we'd be male and female. Our anatomical structures of such, and doctor could not tell our ethnicity unless he looked at our face.
Mm.
But now, assume that one has royal blood, another one has demented blood. We have 3 blood types, and they're not black and white either. Neither
Right.
one.
So a godly value then would be to view human beings based on their common human characteristics, their common human experiences, and those sort of universal things that tie us all together.
Except all of us as being people, distinguished by effort and opportunity. That's what distinguishes us.
All right. You gave a remarkable speech in 1988 at the Democratic National Convention, and there was one line in there that struck me, and I'll paraphrase a little bit, but you said there are different people, different races, different regions, different religions, different experiences, different perspectives. But the genius of America is that we all come together as one. Is that still a hope for us in a country that seems so divided?
E pluribus unum, the men we're one.
Mm-hmm.
That is the genius of America. China for the Chinese, and France for the French. America for all of us. Some of us came on immigrant ships, some on slave ships, some as refugees, but we find some common ground in law. We may not be brothers and sisters in law, but we should be brothers and sisters in Christ. We find some sense of common ground. We all need adequate food and healthcare and education, and a chance to make a contribution, a chance to participate in what makes for a great society, and to be a light in the darkness for the rest of the world. When we can stand up and fight against apartheid in South Africa, we are a strong leader.
Right.
We can fight the end genocide against Jewish people in Europe. We are strong people. When we excuse those types of behavior and choose dollars over people, well, weaker people. In the end, right is might. Might is not necessarily right.
I want to ask you a question. It may seem strange on the surface of it, but do you consider yourself a prophet?
No, just a minister who felt the call to serve by God. And I carry no extra credentials except a long-distance servant.
But your message has been prophetic and kind of the sense of the Old Testament of bringing light to injustice in the world and society.
Well, I know if this room were pitch dark and there were no lights, someone lit one candle that would challenge all the darkness. The candle would be in the minority, but the power of the light would challenge the darkness. So Rosa Parks, when she sat in the front of the bus, above the driver's head was a sign, the color seeing the real whites in front, those who violate will be punished by law. She had no political power, she was just mostly right. The students in Little Rock in 57 tried to go to the school of their choice down the street where they lived. They had no army, they had no guns, they was mostly right. Dr. King dreamed of one America on the one big tent. He didn't carry arms. He was mostly right. That's power in being mostly right, mostly morally right.
And that's the moral center you talk about.
And the political center may be the Republicans should be more concerned about the Republic than the Republicans. Democrats should be more concerned about democracy than Democrats. The moral center, in slavery time, good guys said, don't treat them so bad. Bad guys said, treat them as I want to treat them. The moral center said, free them up to treat them as you want to be treated yourself.
Right.
The moral center is different than either party's center.
I'm curious, you've worked for human rights for so long, for so many decades. What do you see as the most pressing issues today in terms of human rights, civil rights, in terms of the struggle for equality and freedom?
The growth of poverty.
The growth of poverty.
Too few people have too much, they're greedy. And too few have too little, they have more mouth than money. The amount of money we spend preparing to kill each other militarily and not prepare for a peace budget. Racial polarization. Some of us we've given up on trying to live together. We must learn to live together. We must learn to love one another. But some of us, we hate our brother more than we love Jesus, so we choose hate over love. That's a bad choice.
Right.
Some of us hate our brother more than we love Jesus. Because you can't reconcile Jesus and your hate.
Right.
Jesus is love. God is love. Only the pure in heart can see God. If your heart's not pure, because it's made impure by racism or gender bias, you can't see God. If I can't see the God in you, because you're a white guy, I can't see you. But if I can see you as a whole person who can make a contribution, I can see the good in you, the God in you.
Right.
Only the pure in heart can see the God in somebody. If I say, well, he can't learn he's white. He can learn he's black.
Yeah.
So only the pure in heart shall see God. So if your heart is made less pure by these biases, you cannot appreciate. You never know who has the cure for cancer. I mean, Dr. Charles Drew developed blood plasma. Many soldiers' lives were saved by a black guy develop blood plasma. And there are those who didn't want the black guy to become educated, to become a medical doctor.
Right.
He saved lives. Somebody is going to find a cure for AIDS or cancer. So don't limit who God gives genius to. God gives genius to whom He chooses.
And of course, we harbor all types of biases, some centered on race, some centered on perhaps orientation, some centered on gender. And those are the types of biases that seeing the divine in people can help us overcome.
But we learn these biases. We must unlearn bad lessons we've learned well.
Right.
Unlearn them. We're not born thinking one race is superior to another. That's learned behavior.
Right.
In our household, there are 7 children. All of us are different complexions. No one is taught they're superior based upon the complexion.
Right.
So they don't believe that. They just know they sleep in the same bed, the same floor, same rules, same prayer, same church. But suppose we had said, well, you are different because of your skin complexion. That would be learned behavior. We must learn that what's God is to be loving and caring.
Well, we are in the process of.
And I would say that people care that I've been to Appalachian State, I've been to Harvard, as the case may be. People care, people really don't know that you care. Do you care? At the heart of our religion is the will and the capacity to care, and not be limited in that care to one religion, to one language, or one side of the town.
Right. And we're in the process of unlearning, and you have been a major force in that process for half a century now, and I'm so honored to be able to sit down with you today and talk a little bit about your role and about your belief. Talking with you gives me hope for our country and for this continued process of unlearning.
Part of my learning experience, I'm a great Cracker Barrel fan.
Your goal, make somebody take you to Cracker Barrel before you leave town.
The reason is in part, and not only do I enjoy cornbread, dumplings, and all that stuff, but it's kind of where people, basically poor working class white people and black people have much in common. They like cornbread.
Right, right.
They like biscuits, greens, fried apples, and chicken.
Yes.
And across the country, the class of people that go to Cracker Barrel tend to be the common black and common white people.
Right.
Who didn't realize they had so much in common. So to me, it's at least a social experience and extremely nutritional. It's both.
Well, maybe if religion can't bring us together, cornbread can. Would that be a fair way to end?
Well, and beat Michigan is what miracles look like.
That's right. Appalachian beat Michigan. That proves that miracles can happen. All right.
That's what miracles look like.
All right. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure and an honor to have you on our campus, and I hope you have a good stay here.
Well, invite me back, man.
We will invite you back, and make sure somebody takes you to Cracker Barrel before you leave.
No comment.
No comment. Well, thank you, Reverend Jackson. Thank you for joining us on Religion and Life here at App TV. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you've got another appointment coming up. That's it for this week. Join us next week when we'll talk to bioethicist John Hardwig, who will discuss ethical issues surrounding death and dying. Until then, this is Ozzie Ostwalt.